Hi, Sean. My name is Alexa McElroy. My family has lived in Homewood now for 7 years. I have a 7th grader at the middle school, a 4th grader at Shades Cahaba, and a 1st grader at Shades Cahaba. And I have the honor of serving as PTO president this year for the school.
Welcome to the Shades Cahaba Oral History Project. I'm your host, Sean Wright. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the 1920s, Shades Cahaba's first decade. Now, I got to know my guest when I volunteered to help with the PTO's Centennial Celebration that's going to be held at Shades Cahaba on October 13th from 4 to 6 p.m. I'm going to let Alexa tell us what's going to be happening on that day.
All right, Sean, for our Centennial Celebration, as you said, October 13th, in the horseshoe area of the school out back, we will have lots of outside festivities, including a face painter, a band that will be playing 20s music. We will have a food truck, the Swamp Monster food truck, which will offer food. And one of the Shades Cahaba alum actually owns that food truck. It's barbecue. Farm Bowl will also be there. Edgewood Creamery will be there. And then we'll have, of course, no celebration is complete without birthday cake. So we'll have cakes for all.
Now, I do want to say that when you say out back, people my generation will know that as the front.
The front.
So the owl door where the owl is right now is out back. So that's where it's going to be.
Yes, in front of the playground. As we refer today, the horseshoe. Yes.
Now, just as a side note, you know that the tunnel is called the underpass.
No.
That is okay. That is my gift back to the 100-year anniversaries. We all grew up calling it the underpass, and I'd completely forgotten about it until somebody posted that on Facebook, and I thought, that's my goal. It's going to become the underpass again.
The underpass. I like it. I'll work on that. On that.
So what's going to happen when we go inside the school?
When you enter the owl door, the Birmingham Zoo is going to have their owls at the school so that the children can learn more about the owl and our awesome mascot that sits on top of our school. Then as you turn down the 2nd and 4th grade hall, you have worked so hard on a wonderful timeline of our school. So we will start with the 1920s, and you can walk down and look at the history of the school throughout the decades. Then as you complete the timeline, there'll be an opportunity to grant a birthday wish for Shades Cahaba. And that wish is going to be raising funds for a new curtain for our gym. We are in dire need of a new curtain.
Have you picked out a color yet?
I have not. Dr. Lowry and Miss Pepper are busy bees working on that. And then finally, as you exit the school, we are going to have an opportunity for alum and current families to write wishes for the next 100 years. Things that they wish for Shades Cahaba. And we are hoping to also have an opportunity for our students to leave mementos for a time capsule that will be left.
That's going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to that.
It's going to be a joyful day.
All right, so we talked to Dr. Lowry on the last episode, and we talked about the early 1900s leading up to 1920 and kind of how the school started and all that. So at that point, we left it that we're going to start a school. And there was a contest to name the school. And the ballot read, I suggest the following name for the new high school now being built in Shades Valley. And what do you think the winner was?
Shades Cahaba?
Shades Cahaba. That was a softball. Now, whoever it was that picked that person's been lost to time. But that's fine. It's been Shades Cahaba ever since. It was also Jefferson County's first consolidated school. The way I interpret that and have read about it is basically they brought together a lot of these smaller schools that were teaching high school level courses and all that and brought them under one roof. And Jefferson County was going through this. It was the high school rule, I believe the law was called, where they were saying that every county in Alabama had to have at least one high school. But then they started breaking them down in districts. And I think over the next decade, they really added a lot of county high schools. The school opened on September 19th, 1920. There was a dedication a couple weeks before that, and that is where they unveiled those 2 bronze plaques that are on both sides of the auditorium. And it was to memorialize people who'd been lost in, I believe, World War I, maybe some other wars as well. It opened 1920, had 4 high school grades. There were 5 teachers and 156 students. Now, there were some elementary school kids, and they came from Union Hill, and they had moved into this wooden 2-room building just to the east of Shades Cahaba building, and it faced Hollywood Boulevard. I think that building is where the Chamber of Commerce is now, because before that it was the Board of Education, and before that I remember it being the Girl Scout hut that sat up there right above the playground. So I think that's where it was. Now, have you heard the phrase Union Hill?
I have not.
You have not?
I have not.
You've driven past it a lot.
I have.
Yeah. So there's Union Hill Cemetery as you're going to Mountain Brook.
Yes.
So that is the cemetery for a church that was there. It was Union Hill Methodist Episcopal Church, and the school used the same building. So the church would meet there, and then the school would meet there. And then they eventually moved it down closer to Shades Cahaba. The congregation of Union Hill Methodist merged with Mountain Brook Methodist in Crestline on October 10th, 1948. And then they merged with Canterbury United Methodist Church on October 12th, 1952. That cemetery, I guess, now is part of Canterbury. I don't know if they have a link to that, but I guess over time that's kind of where it went to. They demolished that building, the Union Hill building, when they developed Highway 280. So they just came right through there and tore it right out. So that's why there's a cemetery.
And no church.
And no church. As the current PTO president, I thought this would be a great episode for you to be on. In a previous episode, I told everyone that the first principal was James M. Ward. You've seen him around the school. His picture's
got
right
his own
there.
portrait,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Really nice boy. I didn't know who he was up until a week ago.
And he was principal for a long time, correct?
He was.
Like
He was
20-something years?
Yes. I think he left and R.B. Nichols came in behind him, and R.B. Nichols was there for a good while. So James Ward did a lot for the school. And James Ward's wife also taught there.
Interesting.
Yeah, and they lived in downtown Homewood and right around that area. He did a lot for the school, but he couldn't have done any of it without help from the Shades Cahaba School Improvement Association, which was formed in 1920, just a month after the school started. And by the second semester of 1922, it's just a little over a year later, the School Improvement Association, they raised enough money to buy a wood frame structure at the rear of the school. And half the space was the lunchroom, and the other half was the woodworking shop, which just sounds awful. I can't imagine having those two things there together. Before that, though, the lunchroom had been the science lab. So,
Correct.
and we talked about this on another episode we're going to have in the future that's dedicated to lunchroom ladies. But it's all about realize they needed to feed the kids there, and they split up time in the science lab. The science lab would, I guess, use both sides of the day, but right in the middle, they would move all the equipment and serve lunch on the table there. A lot that
Times have changed.
A lot that the Improvement Association has done for them. Shades Cahaba School Improvement Association later became the PTA, and now is the PTO.
Correct.
The State Department's Division of Secondary Education, they judged that the school was not up to its standards when it first opened up. It's the standards of the Association of Colleges and Secondary Institutions. The library only had 725 volumes, and it was not enough for recognition. So once they found out about that, I guess we call it the PTO then, they sprung into action, got busy, filled up the library, and got their endorsement soon after that. So does that ring a bell?
Yes, I think the spirit lives on. The spirit lives on. In fact, we just provided all of the new furniture for our renovated library.
Oh, wow.
In the past few months for
So
Miss Gladney.
I know this is your only year. I guess you've been in the PTO in the past.
Yes, correct.
So what are some of the projects that the PTO does for the school now and in the past?
Well, we have one fundraiser each year, and that is our Winter Festival held in February of each year. And it is through our corporate sponsorships for this event, our silent auction, ticket sales, and our big Almazing race. We usually bring around $90,000 into the school each year. And with that money, we are able to do things like classroom assistance, which we give the school over the summer, we give the school $30,000, which is distributed to the teachers to use as they wish in their classrooms. We also have room in our budget each year for additional teacher grants. For example, this year we have $23,000 budgeted, and throughout the year, teachers can submit applications to the PTO for anything that they might need in addition for their classrooms, be it any kind of resource, flexible seating. We see a little bit of everything, but we provide that support for our teachers.
One thing that I keep going over and over again when I talk to people about Shades Cahaba is the community support. The community rallied to get the school started back in the 1900s. They supported it with the School Improvement Association every year, and every time I talk to somebody, they just talk about how we've rallied around our school and others as well, and turned it in what it is today. All right, let me hit you up with some highlights of what's gone on. The school opened in 1920, but there was no electricity until 1921. And I saw that and I thought, that sounds awful.
Yeah.
But
especially on a day like today.
Yeah, exactly. But I did a little more digging, and only half of the homes in America had electricity in 1925. So maybe they were ahead of the game at that time. And they did, the first edition was in 1926, and it was to alleviate overcrowding. And if I had to guess, I'm thinking that is and I forget what hallway it is, but not part of the U, but that one to
the third grade and first grade hall.
Right. It's a 2-story
Yes.
right there. I believe that is the first edition. And then a second edition was added in 1927, and it included a new lunchroom and allowed the 3rd through 6th grade students to move to the main building. So they're still up in that hut up on Hollywood Boulevard, and they were kind of a separate school at the time. And they brought them down and put them in the building, and that was the year in 1928 the elementary and high schools were placed under the same administration, and then they just considered grades 7 through 12 the high school. And when I was talking to some friends who went to elementary school in the 40s, everybody says that they kept the schools pretty separate. They wouldn't let them mingle. One friend who was he was in 2nd grade in 1948. He really loved the pageantry of the high school and the football games that were going on and being a part of that. And he was kind of sad when all the high schoolers left. But when I was talking to somebody who graduated in 48, he said, we never saw the kids. He said, we saw the younger kids when they were marching them into the lunchroom through the windows, and they were kept apart. And I believe the lunchroom that they renovated is the same room that EDP, Extended Day Program, is at right now.
That was, yes, correct. And
Yeah.
to my knowledge, the original cafeteria was where EDP is currently housed.
And that's where it was when I was there. So it didn't change over until they did that construction back in the late 80s to put the lunchroom in that we know now.
So, Sean, when did electricity come to the school?
It came in 1921.
Okay, so
Yeah.
shortly after it opened.
Yeah.
And then I read that for a while, we had the only field in the state that had electricity and scoreboards.
Yes. And when we talked to Herb Griffin in a later podcast, he talks about running the scoreboard during the 40s. And we had an electronic scoreboard, we had lighting, we had bleachers on both sides of the field. On the Ponciana side, it was all concrete was there. Wow. We had a pretty big deal sports program and field and all that, and that's something that I hope to talk about in a future episode as well, where we get into the sports. And they played baseball down at Rickwood Field, and they had a pretty good sports team. We had football, we had baseball, and there's some basketball, and you'll see that on one of those pop-up displays. Yes, even a women's basketball team as well.
Oh, wow.
And I love that one because, and I'm looking in my room, there's a picture up there of my grandmother's basketball team from the 20s as well. That was in another school, another part of Alabama. And I think it must have been pretty popular at that time. Now, my favorite part about my grandmother's picture there is I don't think she was an inch over 5 foot. I just must have been tough playing basketball back then.
So were the athletic teams, did they go by the name the Owls?
No.
They did not.
They did not. And there's a great picture, I'll try to get it out there, of a famed coach, Piggy Mitchell.
Okay.
And he'd been there for years and years. He started in the 20s and went to Shades Valley when they became Shades Valley. And he has a shirt on, and it says Shades Cahaba Mounties. And right in the middle is an owl. So just like Auburn Tigers, War Eagle, Alabama Crimson Tide, Elephant, we had two mascots.
Okay.
So I don't know why. It's but we had them both. But they proudly had both. And I have a feeling they took the owl down in hopes that it was going to go to Shades Valley. But maybe there were other reasons that we'll find out also in a future episode. We had some pretty good sports teams at Shades Cahaba. And when you get into some of the history behind it, you can see that we did really well. All right, so this is an episode of First. It's the first consolidated high school in Jefferson County. We've had our first classes started in 1920. The first principal, James Ward. We had the first additions to the school. But the one thing that we haven't mentioned is the first graduating class. Now, there's a little controversy. And I found this is true at Shades Valley and Homewood High School. There is the first graduating class, and then there's the class that wants to assume the mantle of first graduating class. You'll talk to some people, and they'll say, no, our class was first because we went every year.
All the way through.
But there's really a first class. So I think the first class that claims the title is the class of 1923. But there was a class of 1921, and it consisted of 4 women. And it was Jessie Elizee, Lucille Watkins, Rexina Hubbard, and Inez Marable. And the reason why I found that out was in the 1922 yearbook, the historian was granted a page to write their history and what had gone on. And they said, they were proud to be the pioneers and that they understood that the next graduating class had boys in it. So they wished them luck.
That's awesome.
Before we finish up, I want to mention some other schools in the Homewood area that started in the 20s. Edgewood Elementary started in 1926, and they started plans for that about the same time Shades Cahaba was starting. The next school was in 1928. That's when Hall Kent Elementary School opened. And Hall Kent was an offshoot of the Zealous-Sophian Academy that was in Oak Grove. That was also the graduates from that Zealous-Sophian Academy were the ones who were instrumental in starting a high school. And we talked a little bit about that academy in the episode with Dr. Lowry. There was also an Oak Grove Elementary School back then that started in 1908, but it burned in 1927, so Hall Kent took its spot.
So is Oak Grove located where Hall Kent is currently located?
Yes, so Oak Grove was a town, I guess. I don't know if it was incorporated or not, but we can assume it's the whole West Homewood area from like Green Springs all the way over. There was a lot of pasture land out there. There was a big dairy farm out there. There was, I believe it was the Kents who owned the dairy farm out there, as in Hall Kent. Homewood started combining Edgewood, Hollywood, Rosedale, and they brought in Oak Grove, the country, and brought it in. So, and that's kind of how we grew. We're kind of at the end. I think I've finished everything for the 1920s. In the next episode, we're going to talk about the 1930s. And anything else you want to add about the celebration coming up or what you guys are doing in the PTO?
I hope to see as many people as possible come and celebrate this joyful and momentous occasion with us. Come on down, October 13th, 4 to 6 at Shades Cahaba. I'm
looking forward to it. I think it's going to be great. So thanks for visiting the 1920s with us at Shades Cahaba. And thank you, Alexa, for taking the time out to speak with me and for everything the PTO has done for us this year and in the past. And just like the Shades Cahaba School Improvement Association, we're much better off with you guys helping us out. So thanks again.
Thanks for having me, Sean, and thank you for everything you've done to contribute to this wonderful celebration.
You're welcome. I'm really glad that Alexa was able to stop by today and talk about the 1920s and the PTO as we head towards the 2020s. Now, don't forget to mark your calendar for October 13th and join us at Shades Cahaba for the Centennial Celebration. Now, if you search for Shades Cahaba Elementary 100th Birthday Celebration on Facebook, you can follow the page and receive any updated info. I hope you tune in for the next episode, and don't forget to tell your friends about the Shades Cahaba Oral History Project. You can find it at shadescahabahistory.com and where all fine podcasts are downloaded. The Shades Cahaba Oral History Project is sponsored by SeanWrightArt.com. Yep, that's me. When you go there, look for the link to Shades Cahaba and you'll find shirts and accessories featuring the exclusive Shades Cahaba Centennial logo. This logo is based on an image on the cover of the Owl Yearbook back in the 1920s. It's been updated to celebrate the 100 years of the school, and it helps us to offset the cost of producing and publishing this podcast.